Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another interview for The Art of Sherlock Holmes. We have an author interview today. It's Steve Philip Jones. Hi, Steve. Where are you dialing in from?
Hi, Steve. Hey, I am in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, eastern Iowa. I'm coming from the beautiful studios of Reverend Entertainment.
Oh, fantastic. So I see there's some great stuff on the wall back there behind you.
Yeah, we actually, there's a tremendous picture of Frankenstein, a reproduction of one of the old posters from, I don't know if that's from the 30 or a reprint. And those pictures, you can't see them, but there's a wonderful film John Carpenter did many years ago called Christine, based on Stephen King's novel. And those are actually production stills from the opening of the movie and the assembly line. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. And then some shots of the cars. Just really gorgeous stuff. Friend of mine, Justin Bean, who's letting me use his computer right now, is a huge fan of Christine. I am too, and I just think it's a great background.
So. Yeah, it's a fantastic place to be dialing in from. As usual, I'm dialing in from the MX office here in North London. For the eagle-eyed of those watching, I'm not wearing my lucky West Palm Beach t-shirt because I have a minor issue with my shoulder. So I've got a brace on, which stops me from wearing any t-shirts. So it's only collared shirts for today. So what we'll do is we'll dive straight into your writing, Steve, and tell us a little bit about these two books.
These two are comics. They're through Caliber Comics, and they are Sherlock Holmes pastiches, and these are the kind that The Adventure of the Opera Ghost would be one where we had Sherlock Holmes meeting the Phantom of the Opera, and the second one is meeting Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Holmes. The one on the left was, it actually more concentrates on Watson. It just kind of took off on its own. It takes place soon after, about a year after Holmes comes back from the Reichenbach Falls, and how Watson really recovered from that. At that time, more people have gone over the story since then, but at that time, I think I was one of the first. I don't know. I'm not sorry, folks. But he's not too happy. He's recovering from his wife Mary's death. He thought Holmes, his brother had passed away. He comes back. And then they're in the middle of this very strange adventure, and how he goes through it, the emotions he goes through, and how he recovers from both those adventures.
And how big are the comics? Are they like large format or more kind of book format?
Standard size. The Opera Ghost is actually 48 pages, so it's like a graphic novel, where the Jekyll and Holmes is a standard 24-page story.
Okay. Yeah. So we have some comic books, Sherlock comic books that we've done, and again, both for a graphic novel at the sort of 150-page,
right,
which is the Petacopple stuff, and then we've done some that are very similar to these two.
Right.
And then Clive Cussler.
Yeah, this is a nonfiction book. This was more of a labor of love. It took about 8 years to write, but it's the first and so far the only review book on Clive Cussler's adventure novels. It focuses mostly on the Dirk Pitt adventures. The most famous of those would be Raise the Titanic, but also he has other adventures like the Isaac Bell series and the Fargo series and Numa Adventures. And I'm blanking on one, and I'm sorry. But it really focuses on, he's been around for like 50 years. He has been a tremendous influence on other writers, starting in the early 70s. And this book looks at that, looks at some of his influences, reviews them, and looks at those influences, and then looks at the films. There's been a couple of movies made off his books. And that one, as I said, it was a labor of love, and I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to do this one in particular, because I just thought Mr. Cussler deserved that. He's a writer who was also influenced by Doyle, and it shows in his work. And I hope people enjoyed the book if they check it out.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that question. Obviously, Doyle would be amongst one of your strongest influences, but who else would you say sort of influenced you to get into writing?
Well, my two biggest influences when I was younger were Doyle and Poe. I'm a big Edgar Allan Poe fan. And then as I got older, Dashiell Hammett, Clive Cussler was a huge influence as well. And I have to admit, H.P. Lovecraft would be an influence of mine as well.
Well, we'll be coming back to Lovecraft in just a second.
Sure.
But first, a couple of Dracula orientated books.
Yeah, my two favorite characters ever since I was a kid were Sherlock Holmes and Dracula. Dracula is my all-time favorite novel. So the one on the left, Dracula, that's the first full-length, faithful adaptation of Stoker's novel and also the short story Dracula's Guest in any medium. So again, kind of proud of that. The other is a sequel, and there is a very wafer-thin cameo by Sherlock Holmes in the Suicide Club. That's like the first time I ever dared try and put any Sherlock Holmes in a story of mine. So.
Yeah, so Dracula is a very popular one for pastiches. Probably one of the best ones out there is by Stephen Seitz. He does a Dracula pastiche. So did one with Gerald O'Hara, who's a former Hollywood film director.
Yeah.
Who then turned his hand in retirement to doing some writing, and we did a Adventure in Transylvania, I think, for him. So this is very different. King of Harlem. What's this all about?
That's my first novel. What is based in back in 1936? Orson Welles, who you see there on the left-hand side or the right-hand side again. I'm sorry. He was 20 years old, and he made his Broadway debut directing what was called the Voodoo Macbeth. It was part of the WPA. They had a series of theater groups across the country, and every group had two divisions. Well, one would be just musical and comedy. The second was Shakespeare. And Wells was hired to direct the Shakespearean unit in Harlem. He was hired by John Houseman. And of course, you have a problem. Well, how do you do Shakespeare when everybody in your cast is going to be black? Wells's wife came up with the idea of saying, well, why don't you take Macbeth and transform it to Haiti back during the Christophe era? You could, instead of the witches, you have voodoo witches. And so he did this. It was just a tremendous thing. But all this controversy surrounded it at the time. There were certain groups in Harlem that were absolutely terrified he was going to make it a minstrel Shakespeare. There were people saying, why is a white person directing this? Why not a black person? Wells put a ton of money into this. The production values are absolutely fantastic. The costumes are great. It was a huge success, but there was all these weird things going on. I mean, he was so much into authenticity for the drums, for example, the voodoo drums, they actually sacrificed to go on the stage during rehearsals to make the skins for the drums. I mean, that's how weird this production was.
Wow.
When I read about that, I mean, of course, me, my bent, I was like, wow, that'd be a great scene for a mystery. So everything about the play is that, you know, is real. The mystery is a fake, but we put the two together.
Often called faction as a type of writing. I know that we'll talk a bit about Phil Growick, who's our creator of the Art of Sherlock Holmes project. But Phil's books have a lot of historical content in it as well. We touched briefly on Lovecraft before. Tell us a bit about these books.
Yeah, these are adaptations. Well, the two on the left, the H.P. Lovecraft worlds, are adaptations of some of his stories. I've done over the years. They've been compiled in 2 volumes. There's also a new one, the first one in 20 years. A new one's coming out later this year, which is kind of neat. But these are like some of the stories. There's The Lurking Fear and Beyond the Wall of Sleep and Music of Eric's Honor, some of the stories that are in there. And they're different artists. The one on the left, the one in the black cover, is the same artist. He's a wonderful Brazilian artist named Octavio Cariello. And we've remained friends over the years. The other cover, the red one, has different artists and their names are there at the bottom. The one on the right, I like writing young adult books. I have about 3 different young adult books out right now, and this is one of them, and it has a Lovecraftian sort of motif to it. The House with the Witch's Hat, which is really set in Wales. But yeah, I just kind of fell into Lovecraft. He was not an influence of mine when I was younger. In fact, I have one story I read of his, The Temple, I didn't like. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that this possibility came around, and you don't do this much work on an author without being influenced by him. But he's a pretty good author. I do like him. But yeah, these probably of all the stuff that I've done, I'm probably best known for the Lovecraft work.
Yeah, it's interesting how people's influences change over time, and when what they're influenced of, the writers that really influence them in their young years can be very, very different to later on.
Oh,
Demon Hunter.
Yeah, probably. Actually, it's called Nightlinger, and I apologize, folks. I shouldn't say Demon Hunter, to say Creature of the Night. I sent Steve the wrong slide. I'm sorry. Nightlinger is a character of mine. In days of old, in the pulp heroes, they would call him a mass mystery man. Today, I think they call him occult detectives. But he's my favorite character that I created, and this is a graphic novel of the stories that were published in the early '90s that I did with Alden Baroza, he used to be in comics. He now is in animation. He's a wonderful artist. But these are adventure stories with a supernatural theme. And this is, like I said, this guy I created, and I'm very, very fond of him. I think he's the best thing I ever created. So
fantastic. And our paths crossed for the very first time with two projects. So the one on the left is Imagination Theatre. So the wonderful David Markham, who we'll talk a lot about in a moment, brought together the scripts from the Imagination Theatre's performances of Sherlock Holmes, and in fact, the rest of the scripts are coming together this year as well. So there's going to be some more volumes, literally capturing everything Imagination Theatre put together. So, what was your involvement with that?
My involvement, I did 2 scripts for them, about 6 years apart. One of them is going to be in the book we'll discuss in a moment, but it's called The Case of the Petty Curses. But by that point, what had happened, I had done the 2 Sherlock Holmes comics we discussed earlier. But anything new I know is a pastiche, but to me, those are really pastiches. It's Sherlock Holmes and some other character. My wife discovered Imagination Theatre driving home. She would drive home late on Saturday nights, and she would pick this up from another state. And she goes, hey, they're doing Sherlock Holmes and stuff. So I listened to it, and being a writer, I was like, hey, that's great. Wonder if I could write a script. That's the first thing that pops in our head. And I contacted Larry Albert there. He said, yeah, sure, go ahead and submit it. And with this one, this was the time I was like, okay, I want to do a real Doylean Sherlock Holmes story. You can never do one that's going to be like, hey, this is as good as Doyle. It's just, it can't be done. But I wanted to do one that's like, okay, I want you to read this or hear it on the radio to begin with, and really feel like you're reading one of Doyle's stories. It's not, but that's really what the bar I was aiming for. And I had an idea in the back of my head for a long time about a gentleman going into a room and he knows something's off in there, but he can't figure out what it is. That was the germination. I don't want to give too much away because I hope people read the story and enjoy it. But that's what I sent to, I adapted it and sent it to Imagination Theatre. They were very happy with it. I was very honored. Jim French was very complimentary to it. But it was 6 more years before I had an opportunity to write another one. But the story that's in the MX book, the new Sherlock Holmes, the volume 7 there, I took that story and adapted it into a short story. So it's the same plot. One's the audio script, and then one's the actual short story.
Yeah, and I've got the volume 7 here.
There it is.
All 12 volumes sitting behind me on the bookshelf here. You need quite a strong bookshelf to put the whole collection on now. This is the current status of the MX book of new Sherlock Holmes stories. So for those of you listening that aren't familiar with it, it's the world's largest collection of new Sherlock Holmes stories by an absolute nautical mile now. We have over 150 authors participating, over 330 stories within. I think we worked out that there's more than 7,000 pages now of Sherlock Holmes stories within this, and it was the brainchild of David Markham.
Right.
And coming back to something you said earlier, Steve, it was created because David felt that the Sherlock Holmes world had moved a bit away from the very traditional Sherlock Holmes pastiche. So the bar is set extremely high by David for participation in the MX collection, and that's borne out by the fact that the last 7 volumes have all received a starred review from Publishers Weekly. So one of the biggest review sites in the US for books. So not only have they all been reviewed positively, but they've all got a starred review as well. We're kicking off a Kickstarter in about a week's time for the next 3 volumes. So volumes 13 through 15. I think it's another 66 stories.
Wow.
In 3 more volumes, so we'll be up to 15 volumes. So it's a fantastic project. Of course, it's all the authors very kindly donating their royalties to the Stepping Stones School at Undershore. So, which we'll come back to again in just a moment. But we should talk about the art of Sherlock Holmes. After all, this is the project that we're coming together for. And you mentioned there your story that appears in the first book is The Case of the Petty Curses. So tell us a little bit without giving too much away.
Well, like I mentioned before, it was the germ of the idea was somebody going into a room and knowing something was off. But how the story starts is a woman comes to Holmes and she tells her that her husband is absolutely convinced that she's put a curse on him. And she hasn't. I mean, that's not giving anything away. It's not a supernatural story. But why does he think that? And so Holmes and Watson have to go to that the home while the gentleman's away, and Holmes does figure out, he thinks he knows what's causing the gentleman to have this. But that's just the start of it. I'm very much influenced by the works, I should have mentioned also Joseph Campbell, his Hero with a Thousand Faces, and there's a little of that hero motif going in here as well, because they do have to go on a very perilous journey into the East End of London. And it's no guarantee that him and Watson are coming out alive on this one. There's a very dangerous journey they have to go on to try to solve this mystery. I think I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go into too much details because it's a short story and the facts are there's few, and once you let one go, you probably figure out the whole mystery. I don't want you to do that right now.
Yeah, so we actually have a prototype of the book here. As you can see, it's huge.
Beautiful book.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. And the idea was conceived by Phil Berwick, who's a 2-time Sherlock Holmes novelist in his own right, with the Secret of Dr. Watson and also The Revenge of Sherlock Holmes. And Phil is a New York guy, but is now in West Palm Beach. And he came up with this quite incredible idea of allocating the short story to local artists and have that local artist create a piece of art from it. So we now have the first edition, which is West Palm Beach. It's 15 artists with 15 stories, and it comes out in May. We are already well underway on the USA edition and also the global edition. So the USA edition will come out in the fall, around about October time, and we're hoping to have the global edition out before Christmas as well, with artists from all over the world. But we have it's quite incredible. We've got artists signed from, Japan, from Mexico, from Turkey, you name it, all over the world. People are signing up to this thing. And the pieces of art are just quite incredible. So we've kept them all very secret. We'll start to share some of them. But one of the exciting and fun things about this is that even the authors don't know who the artists are who've picked up their work. But having had your work done in a graphic novel, I guess you have a lot of influence of how the characters are done. But this must be a bit different, Steve, because you not knowing at all what the artist is going to do with your story.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what will happen. And I'll have to admit, I'm not the sharpest crayon in the drawer or anything, but when I first heard of this project, I was like, well, I'd like to submit because I love the old illustrated novels, from the 18th and 19th century. It was very common, of course, for a book to have an illustration, and Doyle often had Sidney Paget, but you had other authors and other books like N.C. Wyeth and so on. So I thought, well, this is great. I'd love to be on an illustrated book. I guess I just wasn't thinking. I knew it was going to be fine artists, but when the work started coming out on Facebook, where we got to see some of it, and on the MX Publishing blog, I was just totally blown away. I was like, these are, I knew they're going to be fine artists, but these are incredible artists. I got to admit, really anxious to see who did mine. And not knowing what type of artists they are, I don't know what perspective they'll take on it.
One of the key things that Phil wanted to do with this project was that each of the books features some very, very different artists, from landscape artists to modern art to sculptors to mural artists. We even have a tattooist in book one, and he's created an incredible piece of art as well. So just a summary of where we are with the West Palm Beach edition. It is available for pre-order now on all the major bookstores. We have two editions. We have a standard edition, and then we have a special edition, which is being printed on very, very high-grade paper so that the art really sort of jumps off the page. But as I said, it's quite a big book. It's quite meaty. It's 250 some odd pages, and it's case-bound hardback, sort of a tabletop kind of book. But of course, the stories are in there in full as well. So it's a great thing for fans. All the art will come together and launch out on the 9th of May at a Premier Gallery in West Palm Beach, which is the Anne Norton Sculpture Garden. So the art will be there for a couple of weeks. And then on the 25th of May, we're going to have a very special event at Undershore, which is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's former home, which is now the home of Stepping Stones School. So Stepping Stones is one of the major causes that is receiving some support from this project. And we really hope, Steve, that you'll be able to participate in that from Iowa. We'll be having people taking part from all over the world, from all across the US, and then places as far as Mumbai and Shanghai and various other places as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a great event. If I can make it at all, I'll do it. So
fantastic. Well, as with this wonderful Zoom technology that we're using, all you need is a laptop and a camera, and you can take part. It's been really fun talking to you today, Steve, and I look forward to sharing the artwork with you, and then getting some reaction from you as to what you think of it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, and it's been great talking to you. Thanks for coming on and playing Hurt today. So,
thanks a lot, Steve. Cheers.
Cheers. Have a great day.